Hi, it's Colin Cowherd. I started The Volume to bring you some of the most authentic voices in sports. While you're here, make sure you hit subscribe. Thanks.
I wanted to talk about Frank Vogel and Ty Lue for a second because they represent a super interesting dynamic that took place with the Lakers over the course of the last couple of years. In many ways, the Ty Lue situation was the original sin of this Lakers era. The first indicator of where things were going off the rails. I liked Ty Lue in Cleveland. I watched every game he coached there, at least before LeBron left. And, you know, in 2016, I thought he did an excellent job. I didn't agree with everything he did in 2017. I thought he was preaching transition too much. I think it was part of why their defense fell apart. But that's normal for a new coach to try to inflict his philosophy on somebody on a team before really taking the time to realize what works best for that team. But Ty Lue in the years since then has become one of the best coaches in the league. And the job that he's done with the Clippers is one of the best jobs that we've seen a coach do in this league. And I think it's a credit to Ty Lue for adapting. That is the job. The job of a coach in basketball is to adapt. The reason why is you are a constant, but everything around you is not. Your personnel changes on a year-by-year basis. Your personnel changes on a game-by-game basis because of injuries and COVID and load management and trades and any of the number of things that can happen in a regular season. It's a constantly shifting dynamic. Then there's the league. It has to do with the way that the league is playing. The way the best teams in the league are playing, the strategies that they're using. Has to do with matchups in a postseason series. That was a huge deal for Mike Budenholzer before he won a championship, was his stubbornness and his unwillingness to adapt. And that has turned into Ty Lue's strength. Because the way Ty Lue coaches this Clippers team is way ahead of the curve. He is on top of the things that work best in this era. And he could have been had by the Lakers. He wanted to sign there. There's a famous photo. It was going on social media earlier today of Ty Lue having a Lakers birthday cake. The truth of the matter is that was on the table and could have been had. But Ty Lue wanted to be paid as a championship coach. Why? Why do you guys think Ty Lue wanted to be paid as a championship coach? Oh, it's because he won a championship. But then the Lakers offered him standard NBA coach money and standard NBA coach length of the deal. And Ty Lue was insulted and he walked away, as he should have, because that was insulting. And so they went with the discount coach. And I don't want to be super hard on Frank here, because the reality is with Frank is he did a really good job in that 2020 season. But it was a perfect storm of events that went right for him. It was an archaic style of roster. For 60% of the minutes in the regular season, they played AD at the 4. They were playing traditional centers. They were not playing 5-out basketball. They were playing traditional, the 4-out, 1-in offensive basketball. On the defensive end of the floor, they were playing screen and roll coverages that were very traditional, chasing and funneling guys into your size underneath the basket. But as the league has evolved, as guards have gotten extremely good at shooting off the dribble at any spot on the floor, drop coverages have become less effective. As NBA teams have gone smaller and played more guards and more wings and gone positionless and gone, in many cases, no bigs, all of a sudden when you got a Dwight Howard on the floor, you can run him off the floor because your overall foot speed is too high. And in that 2020 season, there was a perfect storm. The league wasn't quite ready to get out of that era in the sense that the Lakers were too much to handle, and the roster was perfectly catered to what Frank Vogel did. And so he had that moment, and it went well for him. Ever since then, it's been a complete disaster. The Lakers had spacing issues all year last year as they played AD at the 4 if they played AD at the 5 for only 10% of the minutes. So 9 out of 10 possessions, AD was at the 4 alongside another big, and it didn't work. Got into the postseason, their offense was really struggling. And the spacing was horrible and ended up being one of the many things that crippled the Lakers towards the end of the season. And then this season, we don't have to get into the weeds, but it's been an absolute disaster on almost every front because Frank Vogel was a vintage coach from a bygone era. And the style of basketball that he wants to play doesn't work anymore. It might not work even if the Lakers were 100% healthy. It might not work even if the 2020 Lakers were playing today. It's possible that that style might not function anymore. Ty Lue, meanwhile, look at what he's done with the Clippers. He doesn't even want to play a traditional center. He just does it now because of what their roster forces them to do. But he plays 4 guys that can guard multiple positions, that can move their feet on the perimeter. It's all dribble, drive, attack. He's got an advanced zone. He's got like a matchup zone that he used a lot on the Lakers tonight. That's a wrinkle that you didn't see a ton in the NBA in recent years, but a lot of the really good coaches around the league are starting to do now. A lot of the really good coaches around the league are starting to experiment a little bit. It's not just, here's my drop coverage, here's my 5-on-5 defense. It's, here's this nifty zone. Here's a lot of aggressive trapping. Here's a box and one. You're seeing all kinds of nifty, crazy stuff from the forward-thinking coaches in the league. So Ty Lue could have been had if Jeannie was willing to spend, but Jeannie wanted to be cheap, and instead she got Frank Vogel. Frank Vogel did really well when the circumstances were perfect for him, and since then the circumstances haven't been, and it's been a disaster. So in many ways, the Ty Lue situation was the original sin of this era. It was the first mistake in a long line of mistakes that came from the top that led to the disintegration of one of the best pairings in NBA history. That's how much of a catastrophe this has been. But the long and short of it is that he's got to go right now. What are you gaining by keeping him around? You know, my friend Pete Zayas from Laker Film Room said this the other day on his podcast, and I thought it was really, really important in this circumstance. He said, you can't grow anything in poisoned soil. And what he was talking about is that the Lakers are doing irreparable damage right now by not audibling from this. Think about it. Months ago, we knew the Lakers were like this. Months ago, we knew this was a disaster. And for months, we talked about how they needed to make personnel moves. We talked about how they had to shake up the roster. We talked about how they had to make a coaching change. But instead, they made no changes to the roster at the trade deadline. And then their big shake-up buyout signing was a tiny 34-year-old guard, as if that was going to solve their problems. And a really interesting athletic forward that Frank Vogel has no interest in playing for whatever reason. So, Frank is still here, and all the guys that are the culprits of this disaster are still here. And because they're still playing this way, they're doing irreparable damage, not just to the culture of this team, but to their reputation around the league. Let's say this summer comes around and Rob Pelinka calls you, and you're a player in the market for a veteran minimum to a mid-level exception. And Rob Pelinka goes, hey, buddy, you should come play with the Lakers. You can play alongside LeBron James and Anthony Davis. Do you not think they're going to think about nights like tonight? Do you not think they're going to think about this disaster? You don't think that's going to influence their decision-making? After the Lakers won the title, they had access to a great deal of discounted talent. Montrezl Harrell was expected to make more in the open market. He chose the Lakers. Marc Gasol could have made more in the open market. He chose the Lakers. They were able to get these good players because the culture of the team was attractive to people out there. And then last year, you could throw it all away to injuries, and they still competed. They still had good culture, so they were able to get who they wanted. They just picked the wrong guys. But that's going to be one of the big roadblocks this summer now. LeBron's older. The attractiveness of playing alongside him is not the same. Anthony Davis is injury prone. The attractiveness of playing alongside him is not the same. And the front office and ownership group is literally as incompetent as you'll find in the league. That's not attractive to people who would consider signing with the Lakers. So that's why it's so important to do something to blow this up now. Fire Frank Vogel, get a look at Phil Handy. See if he can coach in the NBA. Start your process now.